I'm Patricia Diorio, the producer and host of the Paradigm Shift television show. The Paradigm Shift is an out-of-the-box talk show that inspires us to remember that there is a huge paradigm that is shifting all over the planet today. As we humanity awaken to our authentic nature as unlimited spiritual beings having a human experience, we have innate power to create and co-create our worlds personally and collectively. This show is dedicated to exploring the many shifting paradigms that are occurring today within this conversation. The guests interviewed are pioneers and leading experts in their respective fields. What you are about to hear is a compilation of select segments of conversations that I have had with the many brilliant guests I've interviewed over the years. Enjoy.
When you get an internal life and you come to realize that mind is everything, anything apparently outside of that ceases to be of interest. It cannot compete until eventually you come to realize what you started this program with, which is that it's an internal world, basically. Mm-hmm. That it's the mind that projects anything apparently outside of it.
I really look at the mind. To me, there's like two minds in a way. There's the mind that is in reaction to everything that happens, and there's the mind that is the observer and the witness. And what I hear you're saying is that we're witnessing and observing that thought and not giving our power away to it, as opposed to, let's say, the unconscious mind or the mind that's in continual reaction to every thought that we have. And I think that's really what gets us into trouble.
It's only reacting to itself. There's nothing outside for it to react to. It's the mind asleep that thinks something outside of it would trigger it. It is only its own thoughts about that apparent reflection that it's reacting to it all.
Around the late 1970s, just before 1980, I started to realize that the research that I was doing on my cloned stem cells did not in any way support the information that I was teaching basic medical students. And here's the bad word, okay? Responsibility. And I remember this is not a great word for the audience, because when I would conclude these lectures on this new science, where it comes down to the very conclusion that you are personally responsible for everything in your life, and I would conclude with that, you would see these audience that were just following on every word I said. And as soon as I said that, they were just like, oh, okay, everybody's let go, that's the end of that, you know. And the reality is, there is no way out.
There's no way out. And I remember reading in your book about the woman that had such an objection to that she came after the lecture and just ranting and raving about how she wouldn't be responsible.
You are personally responsible for everything in your life once you become aware that you are personally responsible for everything in your life. And that's just basically the truth. No one has told us. No one anywhere. Our parents didn't tell us.
Right.
The church doesn't tell us.
Well, they didn't know.
School doesn't tell you. Well, because we've been operating in beliefs that are not scientifically valid.
We're creators of our reality. Whether we like it or not, we're doing it all the time. So what we've been raised to do, and our parents and parents before them and most people today, are create our world by default. You know, and not really accepting responsibility, because we don't realize that we're creating our world to begin with, and that's where that whole victim personality comes in. Could you give us any examples of the power of prayer and healing? I mean, actual patients that you worked with or situations that you researched?
Well, one of the cases that really captured my attention is a case that can only be considered a kind of spontaneous remission, which is a kind of cover word for a miracle-type case in a religious context. Mm-hmm. And I must say that surveys show that 55% of American physicians say, if you question them anonymously, that they believe in miracle cures, and they have seen miracle cures in their own patients. This was certainly the case for me really early out of the box. This was in my first year of practice as an internist in Dallas. I had a patient in the hospital who was an elderly black man who had lung cancer through both lungs. This was early on, before there were any decent treatments for lung cancer. He didn't want any treatment at all. It was a wise choice, I think, because we had nothing to offer him. The only thing he wanted was to go home to die in the privacy of his own home. The congregation from his church would gather at his bedside during all visiting hours, and they would pray like crazy for this man. I could barely get to the bedside during visiting hours. I didn't consider this a very effective therapy for this man. And I thought he would be dead in days. And honoring his wish, I discharged him. I forgot about him until a year later, when one of my colleagues phoned me and said, you know, you really should go by and see your old patient. He's back in the hospital. This was a year later. He's back in the hospital with a horrible case of the flu. So I was really disturbed by this. It's like somebody had risen from the dead. Mm-hmm. So I went down to the radiology department, put his old x-ray up by the new one. The old one showed tumor filling both lungs. The new one was clear as a bell. And I thought, this is one of those cases. This is one of those miracle things.
What is your understanding of the perception of spirituality and activism?
I'm constantly amazed when people try to separate spirituality from any of the elements of life, you know. You constantly find throughout time certain corners trying to separate spirituality and science, or spirituality and academics, and spirit, or church and state.
Yeah, I think that well, certainly science and spirituality were separated.
Sometimes we get so caught up in labels that it removes us from the essence of what it is that we're trying to manifest. We're spiritual beings in physical bodies. Part of my feeling toward the needs of others is predicated on my spiritual belief in the oneness of us all, you know, and the fact that we're all connected, you know, and that you can't have peace on the planet if you don't first have love.
Living in the Mind of God, tonight's show, Living in the Mind of God. Could you explain that wonderful title?
Well, certainly. The mind of God is actually a term that many scientists, physicists now are applying to a series of discoveries in the late 1990s. Our understanding of our world shifted tremendously in the last 8 to 12 years. And almost universally, scientists, specifically physicists, now understand that we are bathed in a field of energy that has been previously unrecognized. Some people call it a new field of energy, and my sense is probably not so new. We just never really understood how to look for this field of energy. They describe it as it's a field of energy that's everywhere, all the time. It's already there, that it's been with us since the time we call the beginning, or the Big Bang. And what's really interesting about this field, Patricia, is that it appears to have what many researchers are calling an intelligence. They say that this field of energy that links all of creation responds to very specific kinds of human emotion, and that when we have the ability to change the emotion within our bodies, it's through this field. The field becomes the conduit that may carry those effects beyond our bodies and into our communities, and to our families, and affect change in our world.
So I'd like to begin by asking, what exactly is your spiritual path? How did you come to a place of speaking so powerfully about this interconnectedness of humanity?
Well, I think for any of us, our own journey begins with our understanding of self and of the connection that we have to the rest of the world. That there's a sense in which the world exists within us as we exist within the world, and the interplay between our thoughts and the consciousness of the world is something that is a constant factor in my life. So much so that when you realize that the tremendous power that a negative thought has, I mean, you can start to understand how wars are created. As we separate ourselves through dichotomous thinking from our own inner truth and from our relationships with others, we understand that we actually create the preconditions for war. So if we have, on the other hand, a view of a world as one, a view of a world as interconnected and interdependent, we understand that peace, not war, is the implicate order.
Profoundly stated. It really does begin with each of us.
To learn more about my work, I invite you to visit my website at www.patriciadiorio.com. That's PATRICIADIORIO.com.